Hello everyone, and welcome to our M1 Basic Training webinar. We are glad that you've decided to join us here this Friday afternoon or morning depending on where you're at. We're going to be going over the M1 security and automation control today. This is going to provide an introduction to our control panel, so we're going to tell you, what M1 is, what it can do for you, why you would want to offer this system to your customers. Then we're going to spend some time going over the hardware itself. We'll go over the connections on the main board and just give you all the information that you need on setting up the M1 for the first time. And then we'll conclude our session by going over our ELK RP2 programming software, and we'll show you just how easy it is to program the M1 system. Throughout this presentation, if you have questions, we certainly encourage you to ask those questions. There is a questions box in your GoToWebinar control panel. If you'll just type your questions in there, we will get to just as many of those questions as we can throughout the session. We want to make this as beneficial as possible for you. So definitely type those questions in. If your question is unanswered at the end of the webinar due to time restraints, or perhaps your question is more in depth and we want to answer it, for your specific application, we will provide answers to those questions in a follow-up email that you'll get early next week. That'll be Monday or Tuesday of next week. That follow-up email is also going to include a copy of the presentation that we used today, as well as a link to the recording that we're making of this webinar, and also some other helpful resources, a guide to LKRP, a system design guide, those sort of things that just help you out. Presenting for us today is Jonathan Jennings. Jonathan spent 5 years here at ELK in a training and technical sales role, so he's very familiar with the M1 and all of the particulars there, so we're glad to have Jonathan with us and his knowledge of the M1 today. He's currently the Director of Sales at ESC Central in Birmingham, Alabama. So without further ado, I'm going to turn it over to you, Jonathan.
Well, thank you so much, Amy. It's always a wonderful introduction, and it's a great pleasure to be able to still work and continue my relationship with ELK Products. There's a bunch of great people. And of course, we got Amy here to help us along, so you're not going to be constantly listening to my voice as I slowly put you to sleep on this Friday. So here we're going to start off with a polling question right off the bat. How familiar are you with the M1 control system?
And so you should be seeing that poll on your screen now. If you could just answer that, we'll leave that up for a few seconds. We just want to get to know our audience today.
And I still don't think it's fair that you don't let me vote on this, Amy.
Well, we know the answer to your, you would hopefully be very familiar with the M1 since you are presenting at this webinar today. I will leave the poll up for just a few more seconds and then close that. And thanks everyone for answering, and it does look like the majority of our audience has never installed an M1. We've got a few people that have installed 1 or 2 systems, but I'm glad to have you all with us here today, and we hope that we can provide some beneficial information for you to make your installations go smooth and easy.
So the M1 cross-platform control panel, what that means is instead of having all these different separate systems within a house or residential business, we can basically have this one interface for the end user to be able to control all these different things, whether it's security panel, lighting, maybe you want to do a little bit of light access control, energy management. All these things can be done in one location instead of having all these different remotes to be able to try to control everything. So another great question is, hey, what can be integrated? As you can see here, we've got all kinds of things that can be integrated around the home here. And we will be going to use some of these examples as we move on through the presentation. So what we're going to do is we're going to jump in here. I'm going to kind of give you a nice big overview about the panel itself. So you can see here, you got 16 onboard inputs. It's expandable with 208, and out of those we can have up to 144 of those wireless, and we do have some different wireless options. Outputs, you've got 13 onboard outputs, expandable up to 205. The M1 can use up to 199 different users, and those can be PIN numbers, and that's actually the number you're going to type into a keypad to be able to arm or disarm the unit. And we can also use cards and prox cards, and key fobs, excuse me. We can handle up to 8 different areas or 8 partitions or 8 accounts, depending on your terminology. It's got a 512 event history log. And it does offer 6 different arming levels. Now I know that's going to be really confusing for somebody right off the bat, but what we can do in programming is we can narrow this down to what the end user is actually going to use. So you don't have to use all 6 if it's going to confuse somebody. So that's one of the really nice things about this is we can really tailor the system for the customer themselves. Now the panel does have voice alerts, so it can remind you of certain things. Like if you forgot to arm the system at a certain time, then the system can actually speak and tell you that. It does have a built-in astronomical clock, so we're always going to know what kind of time it is, and we can write rules based upon that. And we'll be showing you some examples of that in ELK RP2 software. Now first of all, a lot of people and end users think this is exactly what they're paying for, is the keypad on the side of the wall. They don't realize there's a control panel sitting off in a closet or in the garage or wherever. But here's the different keypads to be able to interface the system, whether you're arming, disarming, maybe you're touching one of the function keys to make things happen. But all these things are going to be hardwired back to the panel itself. Now the M1 panel can support up to 16 keypads on the data bus, whether it's a little touch screen or the little arming station, whichever one you actually want to use. Now something that's actually taken over a lot, even in our daily lives, is being able to control things when we're not around. We could be halfway around the world, but as long as we have an internet connection or a smartphone, we want to be able to maybe arm the system, maybe disarm, check certain things. Did my heating and air conditioning go out? There's a great example since I'm down in Alabama and it's already starting to get really hot this summer. I definitely don't want to see my air conditioner going out. So I can easily go in there and check on a temperature sensor to see, hey, is the house actually at a comfortable temperature? And the way we can do that is by controlling it by different software or apps. And you can see here there's a list of apps and software based on what type of phone and what you're actually using. There's third-party developers like eKeypad, and of course that's for iPhone, anything basically from the Apple side. There's also an app for Droid device. You can see here the M1 Touch Pro. There's M1 Go that you can actually use for Windows computers and be able to have access anywhere around the world. And one that I'm not 100% familiar with, Amy, is Connect One. Could you give us a little spill on that one?
Connect One is a cloud-based service, so it uses the M1 cloud technology, and it is a fee-based service, and they offer a lot of different remote control capabilities, for a wide range of platforms and devices. And there are some things that are available through the Connect One that the M1 can't do alone. For instance, you have a great deal of user management across multiple systems with that, enhanced email capability, things like that. So for someone that's looking for a remote control service that goes above and beyond what the M1 XEP Ethernet interface can provide alone, then something like Connect One service would be a good option, so something to look into.
Thank you so much. Two-way wireless products. Now, ELK has released two-way wireless products, and basically what two-way means is instead of having a receiver that's connected to the control panel, you have what's known as a transceiver, which can transmit and receive signals. A great example of that is with a key fob. You can arm the system, and you get feedback on the key fob that, yes, the system really did arm. There's 2 new products that are available. Amy, you want to talk about those 2 new products?
Sure. We are very excited about our sound off smoke detector. It is a unique smoke detector in the two-way line. One of the unique features of that smoke detector is the sound off feature, and of course that's why it's in the name. But what that means is that if one of these smoke detectors goes off, or if you just have a fire alarm event on the system, through the two-way it's actually able to activate the built-in sounder on all of the enrolled smoke detectors. So whether you have smoke detector going into alarm, or there's been a fire alarm initiated from an F key on the keypad or from some other sensor on the system, all of the sounders in the smoke detectors are going to go off. So it's like a wireless interconnect on the smoke detectors, which is a really nice and unique feature. The other new product that we've recently released is our single button panic, which is a good panic button for, like if you're wanting to have that kind of like pinned in around the neck or the wrist for, someone that needs to maybe have that emergency call if they fall or something like that. Or, you can also mount these and use them for like a police alarm type device, so, medical or police panic alarms. So we're excited to be having those available now for you, and, we've got some other great stuff coming in the two-way line later this year, so definitely keep your eyes peeled for that stuff as we're continue to add to our two-way line.
Thank you for that. Now, some integration partners. We were talking about all the really cool things that you can do around the house. So here's just a list of different products that you can use, whether it's thermostat, lighting control partners, lock sets themselves, just a huge list of different things that you can actually use there. So now we're going to kind of switch gears here. We're going to dive right into the board and how this thing, and how we actually can connect and wire up a system to actually get it to work. As soon as you pull one out of the board, here is what it's going to look like. You've got this nice decal that's on the front of it, on what I like to call the clamshell. It gives you kind of a great way of exactly how we're going to wire this up, but we're going to dive right in and go through it. One thing I would like to point out is at the bottom of the board is the serial number. We're actually going to need that serial number later on in the presentation to be able to open up ElkRP2 software to be able to connect to this panel and be able to do some programming. Uh-oh, here's one of Amy's quizzes again.
It looks like it's quiz time. Okay, so we've went over some of the features of the panel, and we answered this question when we did that. So how many on-board zones does the M1 Gold have? If you know the answer, go ahead and just type that in your questions field, and we'll give you just a few seconds here to see who's paying attention today. And it looks like we do have some people out there paying attention for us. So the correct answer is 16 zones. That's 16 zones on board. The system is expandable to a maximum of 208 zones, and up to 144 of those can be wireless. So good job, guys. Oh, one too many there. There we go.
Well, I'm just having too much fun on a Friday. Now, as you can see here, we've got the boards themselves are going to be located on the left-hand side, and each two zones are going to share a common negative. So zone 1 and 2 share 1, 3 and 4, and so on. Now, out of the box, they're going to be defaulted to end-of-line supervised. That's with a 2.2 k ohm resistor. You're going to get this little bag with resistors full of them. There's going to be a lot of resistors in there with 3 red bands, a space, and a gold band, and that's actually the resistor for the zones themselves. We can also program those zones to be normally open or closed, and each zone can be different than each other. So we're not going to have to make all the zones normally open or all the zones normally closed. You can have a mismatch of any variety depending on your wiring needs as we go along. One zone we need to talk about is lucky number zone number 16. That can be a normal zone, so it's going to work like the previous 15 zones, or it's actually going to be the zone where we can connect our 2-wire smoke detectors. It can have a maximum number of 20 smoke detectors. We are going to have to be able to move that jumper over to be able to get it to work with that, and you do see we need to put an 820 ohm resistor across that 2-wire smoke detector. This is the only zone that you can connect 2-wire smoke detectors to. If you are using 4-wire smoke detectors, you can connect those to any of the zones to the M1 panel. Right below that little terminal strip, we're going to come down here. We're going to talk about all the power connections. And the first one we definitely need to talk to is be able to, where do we connect the transformer power? And that's going to be located right above the power switch. If you do buy the M1 kit, excuse me, if you do buy the M1 panel in a kit, you're going to get a TRG 1640, which is an elk transformer. You're just going to use the 2 power legs. You are not going to ground it, and you're going to wire those directly in. Above that, you actually have some auxiliary power outputs, and those are 12-volt power outputs. And they can be, for examples that we got here, is motion, glass brakes, anything that you actually want to use for that. The very last one at the very top of this terminal strip is the one that's actually switchable, so we can actually turn that thing off. And that's a great way to be able to reset those 4-wire smoke detectors that we were previously talking about on the other slide. Again, there is a power switch, so if you do need to make a connection or change something, it's extremely convenient because you can just go ahead and take the power off the panel right there. We're now going to turn the board. We're going to talk about everything on the right-hand side of the board, and the first off is the telephone connection. Now, again, if you do buy this, an M1 board in a kit, you are going to get an RJ block set, and you're also going to be getting an ELK 952, and that is a single telephone surge protector. In case there is any surge, this thing's going to do its job and it's not going to feed it on to the panel itself. You do need at least 6 foot of wire in between that surge protector and the M1 panel itself, so just going to have time to be able to clamp down on that surge that may be running across on the telephone line itself. And if you're like me, you really greatly appreciate the wiring diagrams because they speak volumes. Now, the M1 was designed to be able to use the plain old telephone system. There are some alternative reporting methods that you can use out there, like the Uplink 4500, anybody's dial capture devices, Uplink Telguard. There's a ton of manufacturers that make those. If you would like to do IP reporting out of the M1 XEP, which is the Ethernet module, we will talk about a little bit about it later on in the presentation. As long as your central station has a DSC SureGuard receiver or an Osborne Hoffman 2000E receiver, you can use those to be able to report in IP. I'm going to take a little moment there in case we got any questions.
Looks like you're doing a good job, Jonathan. What is the maximum capacity for the battery charging circuit?
Man, let's see here. That was on the previous slide, and I'm trying really hard not to press the back button to be able to see that, but I think it is 17 or 18 amp hours.
That's correct. Yes, so you can have anywhere from a 7 to an 18 amp hour battery on the charging circuit for the M1. And so, you know, if you have a system with fire or you just want to have longer backup time, it can support a larger battery. We supply an 8 amp hour battery typically with the kits.
Those are great. I'm glad I'm not putting people to sleep quite yet. Now, I did kind of do a little foreshadowing on this one. The M1 XEP, there's a main serial port that's going to be located right underneath the telephone connection here. Amy's actually wired up her Ethernet port. She's actually taken out of what I like to call the clamshell, and she slid her XEP into circuit board glides. It saves a lot of room in the can, and you can see here from this picture it does make for a really nice clean looking install. It's got that nice ribbon cable that she's plugged into the Ethernet module and the board itself. So she can actually have access to the local area network or even outside over the WAN. You can also program this thing through that main serial port as long as you have like a USB to 232 type cable or a straight 232 cable itself, and you can see there is a little wiring diagram underneath all the wording. The downside of that is there's hardly any more laptop computers that come with a 232 port in them anymore.
Fortunately, we do offer a USB to serial cable that is tested and proven to work with the M1. That part number is ELK USB 232, so if you need a cable to connect directly to the M1, grab one of those. Now, if you have a USB to serial cable, it may work. You should try it, but they're not all compatible, so just keep that in mind.
With outputs, I talked earlier that the M1 does have 13 onboard outputs, so now we're going to talk about them. First of all, we've got output 1, which you can see here is a black and white wire connected to it, and this is our voice/siren output, so you do need to be able to connect a speaker to it. Keep the loading between 4 to 16 ohms. The panel again has voice, so it can speak to you through that. The next output is output 2. It's a supervised output, and you can see here on the picture that we're not using it, but we have put that regular zone resistor across it. Since it is supervisor, if you don't put that, as soon as you fire up the panel, you're going to start seeing output 2 trouble across the keypad. We do have output 3, which is our dry contact relay. So we can actually wire this thing to control anything that you can actually control with a relay input. So it can actually be endless type of ideas, such as if you wanted to wire into your garage door, you'd wire it in parallel to your little push button on the wall, for example. Maybe you want to turn it on for a water control valve. You could do things like that. But remember, you do need to provide power for that particular circuit since it is a dry contact. Now above that, you can see this really nice big ribbon cable is connected into the panel. That's going to give you 7 through 16 12-volt positive outputs. And with those outputs, you can turn on little LEDs through outputs 9 through 16. You can actually turn those into relay outputs in case you need more relays by using an ELK M1RB relay board. Any other good examples there of using relays, Amy?
You could use relays to control sprinklers. You had mentioned a garage door, water valve. I mean, really anything electrical within the ratings of the panel could be controlled with a relay. I mean, it really opens up quite a few things. Locking mechanisms for access control is a good example. Just a lot of different things. You have to use your imagination on that one. That's pretty much the limit.
An actuator arm to be able to scare your friends?
Sure, yeah. You could activate, one of the ELK recordable modules with like, neat sound effects or something in it, so that when you activate your actuator arm, you could also have some, screams or something, really scare them.
Uh-oh, you and your quizzes, Amy. I'm never going to be able to go to sleep like this. What is the maximum number of keypads that can be installed on the M1 system?
Alright, so if you know the answer to that, go ahead and type it in your questions box. We'll give you just a few moments there. We're getting mixed results on this one. So we'll go ahead and reveal the answer, which is 16. You can have up to 16 keypads on the M1 system. So that's quite a few keypads. This number 16 refers to type 1 devices, which include keypads, access modules, and supervised power supplies. So if you are going to be using access modules and or the supervised power supplies, keep in mind that that total number of 16 includes those devices as well.
Alrighty, the data bus. This is probably one of the most confusing aspects of the M1, especially for your first installation. And I'll go ahead and raise my hand up and say, hey, the first one I ever messed around with when I worked for ELK is I totally blew this because I didn't look at the instruction manual. And the reason being is you can only have 2 home runs connected to the panel. So if you're using 3 keypads as an example, you can't just all home run all 3 keypads back and expect the thing to work properly. You'd have to wire in one keypad and out to the other one and have that third keypad on its separate home run. That makes sense. But don't worry, if you don't like the way I'm talking, it's really nice. We've actually got this nice diagram with 4 different devices, and you can see how it's only 2 home runs with terminating jumpers at the last 2 devices. And that's basically going to tell the panel, hey, don't look for any more devices beyond me. One thing we do need to make mention of here is that the total length of your data bus cannot exceed 4,000 feet. That's going to come into play a little bit more when we start talking about modules. Things that can be hooked up to the data bus, of course, are keypads. Amy mentioned earlier, supervised power supply as an access module, zone inputs, zone output boards. All those are going to be connected onto the data bus. Now, wiring in and out of devices is sometimes not the easiest thing to do. So ELK has come out with these nice data bus hubs. First of all, we're going to talk about the one on the left, which is the M1 DBH. This is a great example to be used for new installations. You can use like Cat5e type wire. You're going to make RJ45s and plug them into this device. You see you've got 9 open slots here. the last open use slot in the kit that the M1DBH comes in, there's an RJ45 with a resistor in it. You're just going to plug that in, and you can see that's actually plugged into J3 there. Now, I did mention that you can only have 4,000 total length on this. When you're using the M1DBH, you have to calculate the wire runs as double. So if I've got a keypad using this and it's 100 feet away, I got to pretend that that is actually 200 feet out there. Instead of just 100. The one on the right is the M1DBH-R. This is more of an example for retrofit hubs. You're going to use traditional 4-conductor wire, and you can have up to 2 home runs per branch on this idea. So you've got 4 branches, so you could literally have 8 different home runs connected to this device. Now, a little side note here, the M1DBH-R needs to be close to the control panel. You can't mount it, far away, like on the other side of the house or anywhere else. It needs to be relatively close to the M1 to actually get it to work properly. Have we confused anybody yet, Amy?
Well, I guess we'll find out soon enough. We're going to go over a number of different examples and just sort of test your knowledge on that, and we'll then actually step through each example and tell you what should be going on with the wiring and termination. But before we get into that, talking about the M1DBH and using the Cat5e or Cat6 wiring, just want to show you quickly how you would actually wire that to, say, a keypad or an input expander, that sort of thing. So this diagram shows you how it would be wired. Of course, on the hub end, you're going to want to terminate that with an RJ45 plug, and we use the 568A standard for that. Then at the device, you're going to actually be using 2 conductors for each data run. So as you can see there, the orange and the green are both connected to the green wire off the keypad, or data A, and then the white, orange, white, green are connected to the white wire, which is your data B, and then we're using the brown pair for power on that. So and again, that ties in with what we were saying before about calculating your runs as double, because the run is actually going to the device and then coming back to the control, and that's why we're using those 2 conductors. So that wiring applies to a keypad as shown, or even with the devices that have screw terminals like input expanders and output expanders, you're still going to wire it the same way. All right, as promised earlier, we're going to go through some various examples of data bus wiring. As Jonathan said, this is probably one of the more confusing things about the M1. We get calls and people needing help with that or running into problems because of it, so we really want to spend some time on this with you today. So looking at this particular example, we have 3 possible termination points. So just type in your answer in the question field as to where you think the data bus needs to be terminated in the example that you should be seeing on your screen now. And we'll give you just a few moments there to put those answers in for us. Do you know the answer, Jonathan?
I do. I got my hand raised.
You do. We'll give just a few more seconds here, and then we'll go ahead and reveal the answer and discuss it. So what do you think it is, Jonathan?
It is A and C.
And looky there, Jonathan is right. It is A and C. Now, so the point to drive home here is that the panel is always looking for 2 termination points, and 2 exactly. So it's not looking for 1 or 3, or it's always looking for 2 specifically. In this example, we only have 1 run. So the data bus connection goes from the main control to keypad 1, and then from keypad 1 to keypad 2. So we're definitely going to terminate the second keypad because it's at the end of this run. but we need to also terminate JP3 at the main control. Because we only have one run, JP3 is actually our second termination point. So with that in mind, let's look at another example. And again, if you want to just type your answers into the question box, we'll give you just a few moments here, and then we'll go over this example. I think that we're getting there. Seeing a lot of correct, or at least partially correct answers here. Jonathan, do you know the answer to this one?
I do. It is going to be C and F, since you've got your 2 home runs. You need basically jumpers set on the last devices on the 2 home runs.
That's right. C and F is correct, and Jonathan's explanation is spot on. We've got the 2 runs. We want to terminate the device at the end of our 2 runs. Now, because we have 2 runs and we've terminated at the end of our 2 runs, we no longer need to terminate at JP3. JP3 is only used when there is a single run going into the panel. So there's a couple of examples of just devices being wired into the bus directly. Let's go over a few hub examples. So we'll start with this hub. This is the M1DBH hub. This is the one that takes the RJ45 termination. So let's see, where does the hub need to be terminated on this particular example? You see we have a number of devices going into the hub. Where's the termination going to occur on this one? All right, I've got a lot of correct answers on this one, which just goes to show how the hubs simplify things for you. So Jonathan, where are we terminating on this one? Really?
Z. No, I'm just kidding. Terminating on A and G.
A and G, and why is that?
Because you only got 1 home run, and you have to put that little RJ45 connection in the last open slot on the M1DBH, which that would be slot J6, it looks like, which was G.
That's right. So the hub itself is considered a single run to the control panel. So we don't have anything else going into the control panel, so we need our JP3 jumper. And then you're, just as Jonathan said, you're going to have your termination on your hub using the plug in the first empty port. You don't have to terminate any of your devices in this case, which again just really simplifies things for you. Now let's talk about an example for the retrofit hub. And you can see all the letters on this one is probably not going to be quite as straightforward as the last example, but let's just take a stab at it. You're going to get a smiley face for the day, Jonathan, it looks like.
I don't know, sometimes this one confuses me.
This one admittedly is the most confusing example that we're going to show, but it is something that you definitely want to keep in mind, because this retrofit hub is exactly what you need when you're going to be switching the system out for an existing system. You want to use that existing wire that's there so that you don't have to pull more wire. That's what this hub is for. So I'm going to go ahead and reveal the answer here, and then we're going to dive into this one in depth, because there's a lot going on here. You can see all those check marks. There's far more than 2 termination points in this particular example, and so we'll explain why. I want to just take this kind of one step at a time here. So I just want to start in this section here where we have the hub connected to the control. Again, that connection is considered a single run. The JP1 jumper is used to terminate the hub itself, so we want to have that jumper in place. And because the hub is the only thing connected to the control, we also need to have the JP3 jumper in place. So that covers the control and the hub. Now we can kind of look at each branch. Now the best way to look at this or keep in mind is that each branch on the retrofit hub is basically like a little mini data bus. This is an active hub and it has active RS-45 circuitry, so each branch is like a little mini bus, and it follows the same rules as the main data bus on the control, in that you cannot have more than 2 runs going into a branch, and each branch is looking for exactly 2 termination points at all times. So if we look at branch 1, you can see we have an example similar to our very first example where we just had the 2 keypads connected to the control. So we've got 2 keypads daisy chained into branch 1. We're going to terminate the keypad at the end of that run, and then we also need to terminate JP2, which is the termination for branch 1, because we don't have a second run to terminate going into that branch. And it's always looking for 2 termination points. So keeping that in mind, as we look at the branch 2 example, we basically just have 2 home run devices going into branch 2. So we're going to terminate each one of those devices, and that's going to give us our 2 termination points that we're looking for. And for that reason, we do not need to terminate at JP3. Now looking at branch 3, we have a daisy chain run of what looks like maybe an input expander and a keypad, and then we've got another input expander on a run by itself. So we're terminating the device that's at the end of the daisy chain, which is the keypad, and then this device that's by itself on its own run will also get terminated. That's our 2 points. We don't need to terminate for branch 3 at the hub. And then branch 4, very straightforward example, single device going into the branch, you terminate that device, you also terminate for that branch at the hub. So I know that can be a little confusing, and kind of went through that very fast. If you have questions about that, definitely get those questions in. We want to get those answered for you. So the 4,000 feet total is just that. It is a total of all of the wire length on all of the runs that are connected to the data bus. So that includes your daisy chain run. So, if it's 50 feet out to this farthest keypad, that's what you're going to be calculating there. You want to calculate how much wire did it take to get there. And that should not exceed 4,000 feet. Now, one thing that I will mention with this particular retrofit hub that we're looking at, because it is an active hub and each branch is kind of like a mini data bus, the 4,000 feet actually applies to each branch of this hub. But bear in mind, the hub cannot be remotely located. It has to be right at the control panel. So you can go farther on your runs, but you can't actually remotely locate this hub. So that's kind of the trade-off between the 2 hubs. The other hub, the one with the RJ45, you can remotely locate that one. But again, you have to count all your runs as round trips. So just bear those things in mind when you're making that calculation. All right, if we don't have any other questions about the data bus, we're going to go ahead and go into the ELK-RP software. And if you have a question about the data bus that pops into your head later, just go ahead and ask it. We'll get to that either at the end of the presentation or follow up with you if need be. So we're just going to hop into ELK-RP here.
Alrighty, we can see here Amy's already got ELK-RP2 software up for us. You can see here there's a list of accounts that we have here, and there's actually an advanced, and that's actually in a folder. And why I'm making note of this is because we're actually going to bring this up as we bring this to you. Now, first of all, an account ID is exactly whatever we want to call this. The ones Amy's got listed here is EZ8 Custom, M1 Standard Custom, M1 Gold Custom, things like that. But for me, I like to kind of keep it exactly what we're doing. So let's just call this one Testing Friday. So I've got an account ID here. I've got the system. That's exactly the type of board that we actually are working with. And of course, we're working on M1 Gold. So we keep talking about the serial number. That's that number that was to the right of those battery leads, it's going to be an 8-digit long number. So there we go. I've got myself my serial number. I've got an RP access code. What this means is the serial number and the RP access code must match before the software can make connection to that particular board. You can see here there's a bunch of red writing. That usually means it's something we need to read. But we're going to skip all that and come down here and create a default account. So default account, all panels are shipping with 5 series firmware in them. So I'm going to leave that checked. We could copy from another account. That will save you a ton of programming time for certain things that you already know you're always going to use, like zone 1 is always going to be the front door. If you're using a central station, you're always going to have the same central station number you're going to be dialing into, what zones are actually reporting. That stuff can already be pre-programmed, so you can save yourself a ton of time. So I'm going to go up here and click OK. And it's going to bring us up to our main page here. And again, we could put that in that folder. Amy had that folder called Advanced, but for us, I'm just going to leave it blank. You can fill out all the name and address if you want to. Special notes are going to be saved in your computer. You can put something in there like always take your shoes off before entering the home. Never delete a certain rule is another great example. Maybe the customer has a large dog you need to remind yourself of, because you think you're always going to remember these things until you come back a year later or 2 years down the road when you're making a service call and you're like, man, I didn't remember this customer had this, a huge pet snake that freaks me out. You kind of sometimes want to make a note of that. To the right over here is a system. You've got all the things about the system. We haven't made connection yet, so we don't have a hardware bootware version. When we install this, here's our serial number. We've actually got a port, and if we ever wanted to change that RP access code, the default is that 246801. Now, we can have up to 199 users on a system. So first of all, I'm going to pick on user number 1. And all I did was go over there and left-click on this, and we're going to pretend that we're programming up Amy. Now, Amy's going to be our master user for this account. She's our master because her master code is actually checked. And currently her default code is 3456. The problem with it is I've now explained to all of y'all that that's her master code. So we probably need to change that so now everybody can go over here and easily disarm Amy's system. So Amy, what PIN number would you like to use?
I don't, just pick something. I don't know.
Alrighty, Amy, and a lot of end users don't absolutely care what their PIN number is, but instead of you always giving out the exact same PIN numbers over and over again, you can let the software sit here and generate you a code. So currently Amy's code is 4629.
Yeah, that seems okay.
Alrighty, glad to make her happy. And she can use this code in all 8 areas, and of course she's the master code. It's still checked and bypassed and ARM. But the problem is we only have 1 user, and most of the time we're going to need more than 1 user on a system. So what we're going to do is we're going to come over here and we're going to left-click on users. We're then going to right-click, and it's going to show up this box here, a new user. We'll left-click on that. It's going to ask us, hey, how many users do you want to create? Let's create 6 more. We can start in slot number 2, but just to make this more fun and to show you that it works, we're going to start in slot 10 and click OK. Hey, do you want to use custom values or do you want to copy from another user? Well, for me, since Amy's a master code, I don't want to copy from her, so I'd like to use custom values. I'm going to click OK there. And you can see here we've made 6 more users. So here we can have, let's say, we got you a maid now, Amy. And apparently, me and my 10 thumbs here are having a little trouble typing. So we're going to give her a user code, and she can only arm and disarm the system in 3 different areas. So let's say we can give the in-laws a code. Man, I'm really struggling typing today. And how much do you trust your in-laws, Amy?
Honestly, quite a bit, but for the sake of example, let's say I don't trust them very much at all. I certainly don't want them, just going through every part of the house while I'm not there. So let's restrict that.
Alrighty, you're gonna love this. We're only gonna allow them access to 3. We can only arm and disarm. And what I'm doing is here, I'm just kind of making examples of areas. We're actually going to be using those later on in the examples. Oh, you know what, Amy, just to make this really, really easy, I'm going to come up here. Sorry, I was clicking in the wrong spot. I need to give you a prox card, right? So Amy doesn't like typing in PIN numbers sometimes. She would rather go up and have a prox card read. The problem with that is the user code's not going to work, so I need to come down here and check that she's going to use a card or key fob, and everything drops out of the user code box, and you can explain that.
Alright, so when you have an access credential, like a proximity card or fob, or even a PIN number for an access keypad, that has to get stored in the M1 system a little bit differently from the other user codes. So, as Jonathan selected, the user has access credential, and you'll notice that the user code field got a little bit bigger than it normally is. We also have the site code and card/PIN number. Now, if we're talking about proximity cards or fobs, these numbers should be printed on that device. The ELK proximity cards and proximity fobs have these numbers printed on them. The site code is typically a 3-digit number, and the card is typically a 5-digit number. So let's just say, for example, that we have a site code of 016, or I typed that in backwards. Okay. And you'll notice it drops the 0 when you do that. And then my PIN number will just, or this is again the card number in this example is, I'm just going to make something up here. And, well, let me try that again. So 016. Okay. That's what's supposed to happen. You're supposed to get this long string of numbers. It could even have some letters in it that represents that particular credential in the system. So then I could say, okay, that's my prox card. I want to have all the areas. Jonathan actually copied from my master user, so it has all the same permissions that my normal user would have. Now, if you're talking about an access keypad, and you may run into this in residential, it may be something more of a commercial application, but it's definitely something that the system supports and you may encounter. Any device that has a 26-bit weekend output will work, whether we're talking about proximity reader or an access keypad. But with an access keypad, the site code is either going to be a fixed value in the keypad, or it's something that you can program. So you'll want to reference the documentation for the access keypad that you have to see what that site code should be. And then you're going to put in the PIN number, which would be the digits that the user wants to enter at that keypad. Now let's just say, for example, I've got a code 1234 that I use at the M1 keypad, and I also want to use 1234 at the access keypad that's outside. That actually does have to be stored in the system as 2 separate users, one as the normal user and another as an access user. With this particular one, I'm using arm disarm because that's what I want the device to do. But if it is a commercial application and you're actually using that credential for access control to unlock doors, you're also going to want to have this access selected, and again, you may have that instead of these options. You may have just access and whichever areas that particular user is authorized in, and then you're going to write rules to tell the system what to do when that access read occurs, which output to turn on to unlock the door, that sort of thing.
I just need to make a few more people here real quick.
So while he's doing that, that's just based on a question that came in, that the point I want to drive home about the access credentials, whether it be proximity card or fob or access code, Those can either be, arm disarm codes. They can be for access control, in which case you need to select access. You could have both. Let's just say, for instance, the owner of the system, they want to have access control for their employees to be able to, get in and out of a particular door and employee entry, but they don't necessarily need to be able to disarm the system. However, the owner needs to be able to do both. You could have arm, disarm, and access selected for that owner, and so if the system is armed, when his credential is presented, then it will not only disarm the system but also unlock the door. So there's a number of combinations that you could have on the user authorizations for any particular user.
Thank you, Amy. So what we're going to do is we're going to come in here and make some new areas. I've made users that can use different areas. So I'm going to add 2 more areas. I'm going to pick on area 2, as let's say that's the in-law home. And you can see here you got different exit and entry times. So in case you might have a door that's not going to be close to a keypad, so you can actually extend that time to allow you to have enough time to be able to get to a keypad, be able to disarm the system. You've got different arming options. The first one, auto stay mode after exit time, no violation. That means if I arm it in away mode, but I never went out a perimeter door, the system's going to be smart enough to go ahead and set that to a stay mode for me. That's a great example for somebody that's never had a security system. Stay key scrolling. If I arm this in a stay mode, and currently if I do, and I come down and I press the stay button again, it's going to change this into a night mode. And a night mode is going to allow certain motion detectors to then be active. So that's the difference between a stay mode and a night mode. And the instance means there is no entry delay. The panel goes into an instant alarm. You can see we can actually set exactly how we want this thing to work. So let's say if I'm doing this for my parents, and my dad, bless his heart, he's really going to struggle in between which motion detectors are active and which ones aren't. So for him, I would just go ahead and unclick the night mode, and it would just be, I would have the panel be able to arm in stay mode. It would be armed in away mode and vacation mode. So I'd cut him down to only 3 that he could easily handle. There you go, Amy. I made you a couple different areas here. And the way you make areas is the exact same way that you make users. Once you learn one way, we just keep repeating the same things throughout the presentation here. Again, we can have 16 hardwired keypads on the system. So let's put this one in the master bedroom there. We are going to assign this keypad to area 1. We have different options that we can have here. Now, if this is the original keypad, which is M1KP, we can actually show the temperature. That keypad actually has a temperature probe built into it, and you can have that temperature scroll across with the other information. Now, down here we got definable F keys. That particular keypad does have 6 different programmable function keys, and you can see here defaulted we're set up for fire, police, and medical. But we can actually change those if you want to. Most of the time, most people just leave those the way they are, but we can make those things do exactly what you want to. So I'm going to go down here and pick on F4, and we can activate, all types of different things. Let's say an automation task. So I'm going to pick that one. In the illumination event, we can actually have it say something if we wanted it to, and I can't remember which number that is. That's right when I think I've got it memorized, I forget.
So what are you looking for?
Automation task. There, I just went right past it. There we go. There we go. And you can even invert the light, blink the light. It requires a code, or it can be a single press. And for this one, I'm going to make it be a single press so I can walk over to a keypad and press it and make all these really cool things happen. And that's what us, crazy guys do. So we're always trying to do silly, weird things to impress our friends. Now, if we want extra keypads on a system, which apparently we need more than just one keypad for Amy, so we can come in here and let's give her, 7 more keypads. We're going to use custom values. And all I got to do is come in here, name exactly where they're going to be. So this one can be at the front door. So we got front door. I can jump down here to keypad number 4, and this is going to be, let's say, the front door, but this is going to be in a different area. So just to give you an example here, I'm going to change this to a different area. We change it that way, and you can see each time I make a change, everything becomes yellow, and basically it's a little caution light. If we look down here on the lower right hand of the screen, we get this little modify lights lit up. That's basically like, hey, caution that you haven't saved all this cool data you've been changing. So I come up here and I'm going to save the data, and everything drops out to be white. Here, I'll make this one be the pool front door. And this will be area number 3. So I'll go ahead and assign these keypads to different areas just to show you how easy that actually is. Now, since almost everybody wants zone 1 to be front door, I'm just going to stick with traditional here and name this one front door. It's defined of exactly what type of zone it's actually going to be. So it's a burglar entry exit delay 1. Remember, you do have that second one in case the keypad's not going to be close by. But out of the M1, as long as you can type that drop-down box, you can define exactly how the panel is going to look out after this particular zone. So there's lots of different examples that are listed in here, but I'm just going to keep it nice and simple. We're going to stick with that one. The type refers to how are we wiring up this particular zone. End of line hardwired / wireless. We're going to be using that resistor out there by the contact. Normally open or closed, and just in case you can do end of line supervised, open or short, depending on how you define that zone. I'm just going to keep it defaulted end line hardwired. Which area is this zone associating with? The different attributes, whether the zone's bypassable or not. Now, if you want this particular zone to be able to chime or voice to work out of the zone, this enable chime needs to be checked. Now, defaulted it is. So if I want this thing to actually speak something, like front door, and you can see as I slowly start typing in, it starts narrowing down my choices. Now, I will caution you about using voice. If the end user themselves are constantly going to be using this particular entryway, I would recommend probably not giving it a voice description because it is going to get on their nerves. I don't use that front door that much. I'm always coming through the garage, so this would be a good example of the front door and my back door out to my patio. I don't use a whole lot either. So those two doors, I want to know if they open or not because I usually forget to lock them.
So it's a good idea to go ahead and put the voice description in. Say if you see on your keypad that a zone's not ready, even if you don't have the chime enabled, pushing the up arrow key is going to allow you to see that zone so that you know which one it is, and also make that announcement based on user input. Zones that you have a lot of use, you may want to uncheck the enable chime box so that those don't chime when you have the chime turned on. But just also keep in mind that your user can turn the chime feature on and off very easily from the keypad, and also choose whether to incorporate the voice or just to get the tones at the keypad. Using judgment as far as which zones need to have the chime, and then also turning the chime on and off as needed will allow the voice to be beneficial as opposed to a nuisance. And so I just want to step through here. You should be seeing a webcam image of a keypad here. You can enlarge that if you need to make it bigger if you can't see it, but I'm just going to kind of step through here, and you can see now chime is in tone mode, and then you have chime in voice mode. You have tone and voice, and then off. So your chime button is going to allow you to scroll through those different modes to turn that voice on and off, or to turn the chime sounds at the keypad on and off as well.
Thank you, Amy. Now we've got our 16 zones here. What we need to do here is let's go ahead and make some more inputs. And I'm going to, again, I left click, I'm going to right click to get this box going, then I'm going to left click on New Wireless Zones. And I'm going to jump down here to zones 33 and 48 to start my wireless zones. And the only reason I'm doing that is because I'm thinking I'm going to add some more hardwired zones. So I want to kind of leave a space between my hardwired zones and my wireless zones. So I'm going to skip 16 zones there and jump down here and make myself have a wireless zone. Now, I know somebody out there really likes to have her key fob, which is going to be a wireless device.
Yes, key fobs are awesome, especially the two-way key fobs where you get to utilize the status inquiry, the feedback from the key fob. As a great little product, and I do love it very much.
So I'm going to go ahead and define this as a key fob, so we know exactly what type of zone this is. Now this is a wireless zone, so I'm going to leave it as type 0. And you can see here I need to kind of go over here to this little wireless setup, and I need to left click on that box, which is going to bring us up all kinds of cool stuff. And first of all, normally supervised means this zone needs to check in every so often. The problem with that is that this is on Amy's keyring most likely, and she's going to be going places with it, like out of town for a long weekend is a great example. So I want to make this be not supervised, so the panel doesn't go into a supervisory issue. And then there's all kinds of different options that I'm going to let Amy talk to you about so I don't mess it up.
Okay, so just to kind of cover, there are 3 different possible wireless options that you could have on an M1 system. We've talked with you a little bit about the ELK two-way wireless. That is one of your options, and as we continue to grow that product line, we're going to have just a full range of sensors available for that. But we also support, with different receiver products, the GE ITI format sensors and also the Honeywell 5800 series sensors. So we have different receivers for the different types of wireless that you could have. It is possible to mix those on a system, but when you are programming your wireless setup, it's important to know, which one you're working with as to determine where you enter your information. When you're loading sensors in through the software, all you have to do is put in an ID number for the sensor, but you have to put it in the right field. So for the ELK wireless and the GE ITI format wireless, you're going to enter your information in the TX ID field. Now some of the GE stuff or the GE ITI stuff has a DL number instead of a TX ID, and so you have this DL field for that. But the majority of the time with the ELK and the GE ITI, you're going to be using the TX ID. So you're going to key your information in there. For the Honeywell 5800 series, your ID number is actually going to go in this HID field as opposed to the TX ID field. And I'm just going to fill in some information here so that you can see as you put information in one of these fields, it enters information in the other field. That's a normal process that just occurs in the software. You just need to be sure you get your ID number in the right field. Now, the Honeywell transmitters require a loop number. For most transmitters, that's going to be loop 1. However, transmitters that have an option for an external contact to be connected, the loop number determines which part of the sensor is associated with that zone. The ELK wireless also uses loop numbers in the same way to determine, like our 6022, which is the 3-zone sensor. You could have that ID number learned into 3 different zones, and the loop number determines which part of the sensor is associated with that zone. Now, GE also offers the sensors that have the option for an external contact. We can only learn that into 1 zone, so it's either the magnet or it's the external device with the GE ITI. They don't use loop numbers for that. They actually use these option 1 and option 2 checkboxes. So when you have an external contact connected to a GE format sensor, you need to select option 1 so that the system knows it's an external contact. If that external contact is going to be normally closed, you also select option 2. Now you don't need option 1 or option 2 for ELK or for Honeywell sensors, just for the GE format sensors. The same applies to this device is a PIR auto restore checkbox. That only applies to GE format sensors. For key fobs, which Jonathan has set up a key fob for me here, you can have an ID number, and that's just for logging purposes. So I'm going to go ahead and make that user number 2, which I know he put in as my proximity fob. So whether I use my button fob or my prox fob, it's going to come in as user 2.
So it's going to be logged into the system as user 2.
Right, and I want to just very quickly address a question that came in that's sort of along the lines of the users and logging, so it's kind of relevant at the moment. But the question was related to time and attendance. The M1 does log access users when they're presented to a reader. There's a log written of the time that occurred and also which user it was. The event log holds 512 entries. So using that as a means of tracking time and attendance, that would be maybe a crude way to do that for a smaller business, but obviously with a 512 event history log, if you have a lot of users in the system, that's going to fill up very quickly. So maybe not the best option for time and attendance, but the information is there if someone were to want to use it that way. Just a limitation on the amount of information that's in the log. As far as like getting that data out, you either have the LKRP software that you can pull the log from, or the M1-to-go software that allows you to pull the log, but there's not a way just to have that information be spit out to a printer automatically. That's going to require human interaction with a piece of software to get that information out. So again, definitely good logging information for record keeping, tracking of who's coming and going, but probably not a good time and attendance option unless it's just for a very small business.
Thank you. With wireless setup, we do still need to go down here. You can see that these are all invalid because we don't have it, but then we got Amy's key fob. You can see here that it's not being supervised, but if we come here to key fob events, we can actually start programming the buttons to do different things depending on what she wants. So let's pick on button number 4. We're going to let this one fire off your automation task. So we'll be able to write a rule for this later on.
That's also a good way to set up like a panic. You could pick like police alarm and have the button just be a panic button, and a lot of people will set one of the buttons up that way, so just keep that in mind too.
Globals, I'm going to kind of skip some things to kind of save a little bit of time. Globals, if you want to be able to use the telephone to be able to control the system, we can do local and remote telephone control, which way our time display is going to be set, the date display, Fahrenheit or Celsius, whether we need to observe daylight savings times or not. This is the first part to get your telephone to work. The second part, so we're going to have to go up here to G29 through 42, ring until auto answer. I usually like to set that up higher than whatever the answering machine or the voicemail system is on your phone. So I'm going to set that to 6. If I like to set up ring, hang up and answer, what that means is I'm going to call up the house. I'm going to let it ring, let's say twice. I'm going to hang up. I'm immediately going to call back. And since it's in that callback within that short window, then the panel itself is then going to answer for me. That's how I'm going to get around that pesky answering machine. And then it's going to ask me for a PIN number so then I have access to the system. One other piece of information I'd like to tell you about is this one right here, this 17823. Wow, I just lost my train of thought there. 172839, that is the installer code for the panel. That is the default code. At first it doesn't make a whole lot of sense, but it is up, down, up, down, up, down across the keypad from left to right. So once you type that in a couple times, then the light bulb will go off in your head. You're about to say something, Amy?
I was just going to try to help you out with that number.
I'm sitting there staring at it, and all of a sudden my mind just goes, too bad. Alrighty. Telephones. The panel can dial up to 8 different telephone numbers. So I'm going to come here. I'm going to go ahead and make some telephones. I don't know, we're getting a little close on time, so I'm trying to speed up a little bit. We have some great questions come in. If we are going to use a central station, I'm usually going to have an 800 number of some kind. The format, a lot of people use contact ID or SIA. The other ones have kind of pretty much died off compared to these two. The account number is going to be the number of the central station and you guys are working on, so let's just, I'm just going to say it's an A, B. Keep that nice and easy there. And my second telephone number is going to be the backup to the central station. So I call it the CSB. It's going to be the same. There we go, the number dial.
Now, I don't know if we're not seeing it. I would added a 0 there for you. I just wanted to point out that it does require 6 characters to be entered for the account number. So let's say you have a 4-digit account number, you want to lead that with the 0, and you can see that if you don't put it in, the software will append that for you.
Yeah, and I'm just making up these numbers going along, and I thought, for some odd reason, I was thinking I counted 6 digits, and as soon as you said that, I was like, wow, that's only 5. Way to go. And since this is a backup number, I'm going to go ahead and define it as a backup number. But my third number I want to dial is, let's just say Amy wants to be notified of non-emergencies around the house. This is something that maybe the central station doesn't care about, but Amy in particular does. A great example of that is she wants to know if she's paying somebody to come clean the house, such as the maid. She wants to know exactly when that maid comes there. It's a great example. The problem with it is the reporting format's really not going to help Amy, because I don't think you can speak in a reporting format, Amy. But if I give you a voice message, I think you'd be much happier.
Mm-hmm.
Now this thing's only going to dial a max number of 2 attempts. And the way it's going to work is it's going to dial the number. It's going to say, please hold 3 times. It's then going to give her the message, and it's going to say, press pound to acknowledge. If Amy does not acknowledge this number, what's going to happen is the M1's going to hang up. It's going to wait a little bit. It's going to call her back. It's going to give her the message again, and that's it. It's not going to keep calling her and going into what's known as a runaway feature and keep bugging the bejesus out of Amy, because that would make Amy most likely very unhappy.
And that way, like if you aren't able to get to your phone, or it goes to voicemail, or maybe you just forgot to press the pound key, it's just not going to keep blowing your phone up. It's really nice that it's restricted like that.
The other part to be able to get this thing to report into a central station is we need to tell it exactly what to report. And currently, right now, the zones that we've made are going to report. Anything other than a 00 means it will report. So the 01, we're going to report on the alarm pulse. We're not going to report on restoral. We're not going to report a bypass, but we are going to report a trouble condition. Let's just say I want to report on a bypass of a particular zone. Let's pick zone 3 out. So I'm going to type a 01 there, and now it's going to basically report on that bypass. The same is going to work for if we jump over here to area reporting codes. Again, 00 means it will not report, but a 01 means it will report. And we got that for the 3 different areas that we did make. So we're going to come down here to automation, and this to me is what really makes this panel so much fun to work with, as you get to make it do all kinds of really cool things. So first of all, I'm going to come down here, and I'm just going to kind of real quickly, I'm going to name an output. And if I didn't type it right, that's okay. I need to check my sunrise sunset, because maybe I want to base rules upon that. If I know the latitude and longitude, let's say I'm using a GPS device, then I know exactly what that's going to be. But if not, there's no worries, because now we can come in here and select a city. Let's see, Amy, we had you in the mountains last time. We're moving your house to the beach.
Sweet. I'm ready for the beach.
I'm always looking out for you. So now we've moved Amy to the beach. The downside is her sunrise sunset time never changed. And what you do is you do have to force the software to calculate that and send that to the panel. And why I make a joke about this is because at my own house I forgot to send the new information to the panel, and I couldn't understand why my light wasn't turning on at sunset. Let's see. Go ahead and give myself a thermostat. There we go. I'm naming you some thermostats. And what I'm doing here is I'm just kind of going real quick to be able to type things in so we can actually use these in rules examples. I thought that was going to be too far. Just had another good idea there, Amy.
All right, so we're ready to dive into some rules examples.
Yes. Now, the thing about the M1 is in order to write rules, we don't need to learn anything special. If you can read and do drop-down boxes, then you can write rules. So the whenever is going to trigger the rule itself. So the whenever can be a time occurrence. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to come down here and pick sunset since I took all that time to calculate sunrise and sunset. We're going to pick at sunset. We just want to turn on a light. We're just going to come down here and control lighting. I like to control light 1. We're going to pretend that's the front porch light. We can even turn that on for duration if we want to, but right now I just want the light to turn on. So at sunset, every single day at sunset, we're going to turn on the front porch light. Ta-da! We've written our first rule. The problem with it is that I didn't tell it to turn off the rule. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to use a rule, but I'm going to trigger a turn off the light, but I'm going to base it on an alarm status. So I'm going to come down here and say whenever the system's armed to night mode, which means, hey, I'm going to bed. And since I'm going to bed, I really don't care who's at the front porch light because I'm going to be asleep. I want to turn that particular light off. So I've got a rule that turns on the light, and I've got another rule that turns off the light. And that is the joys of automation, is this thing's automatically going to do this for me every single day when these things actually work. Work means the trigger actually sets it to go off. So what are the kind of rules you want to write there, Amy?
Well, let's see an example. Like, I want to know when the system has been disarmed specifically by the maid.
Okay.
I want to call me.
Okay. Now this is a great rule whether it's a maid, maybe you have a latchkey kid that's coming home from school. You just want to be notified when they get there. Because my mom used to do this the old-fashioned way, which she'd call us at a specific time. So you always had to answer the phone at a specific time. And this one we're actually going to be using and statements. Now the whenever and statement must be true before this rule is actually going to work. So for this particular rule, we're going to pick the maid, which was user 10. So whenever she disarms the system with her code, we can then call Amy. So we're going to come down here and we're going to select dial telephone number, Amy's cell phone, and what message to say. And there's actually one that the system's disarmed. I just got to find it. There it is. We click OK. So this rule is getting a little bit more complicated. We've added an extra step to it because we now have an AND feature to it.
All right, now let's look at more of maybe of a commercial application with access control. So when there is a good credential presented to the keypad and it's between 8 a.m. and 5 p.m. Monday through Friday, then I want to unlock a door.
Oh, sure. Yeah, let's do your rule. That's not so much fun as my rules, but okay.
you can take it from here. I'll let you do your examples after that.
The problem I'm having here, Amy, is that both of our thoughts are different on how to get these rules to work. And that's kind of the joys of making this happen, is that I think of one way, and Amy looks at me going, what in the world are you doing? So we could do this several different ways.
And keeping in mind that we want to unlock a door, so this is access control. So that's where you need to start. You're
access.
Yep. And the main point of this example is just to show you how you can really dial in specifically, what you want to happen.
So I'm actually picking it on a specific keypad because that's probably going to be the keypad that the employees are going to use.
Okay.
So that's why I wanted to pick that one.
That makes sense.
So now we need to do relative time. Let's see if it's later than 8 o'clock. And it needs to be earlier than 5. Hopefully not 5 a.m. because then that would totally blow the rule. So you do have to be careful about that one. Then you want to control a door.
Yeah, but I only want that to happen on Monday through Friday.
Oh, that's right. You did throw in that little kink in my plan. So we need to pick Monday through Friday. So now we've got multiple and statements. And then we just need to turn on an output. And let's see, we're going to turn on output number 9. I'm picking 9 for the relay board. And now we need to turn on, let's say, for 20 seconds.
So you can see, you can see how we were able to really, specifically define it has to be at that keypad. It has to be, within this time period on these certain days of the week. So you can really, drill down into these rules and, get exactly what you want out of it.
Now, since I gave this a comment, you can actually see the little comment here. And I'm a big fan of writing comments just simply because when you write a lot of rules, and especially if you have rules interacting with each other, it's really easy to get lost when you come back to it months later because I've forgotten what in the world I've done. So the comments kind of really help me of, what in the world am I doing at this one? Oh, it's the access rules. Yeah, for employees. Oh, yeah. Now I know what I was doing. So we made an automation task, Amy.
You did mention an automation task a lot of times.
Yeah, so we probably should define what that automation task is.
I know, because F keys are activating it, and the key fob's activating it, and so what does it do?
Well, we already know the front porch lights is going to turn on for us, so it's not turn on the same light again. So what I'm going to do is we're going to control a couple different lights for you. Because you've probably got a routine when you come home, don't you?
Yes.
I know I have to have one, otherwise I can't keep up what I do with my keys and wallet.
I still have trouble with that. Routine or not.
And for you, we're going to go ahead and control the audio system. And in case you kind of get off your pack there, we can do single zone. We're going to turn on. I would select a source, but I know I did not.
Yeah,
that, but we'll just kind of pretend.
There are certain audio systems that the M1 can interface with from Russ Sound, Nuvo, and Proficient. There is a document on our website, on our manuals and documentation page that outlines, what equipment works and what you can do with it. And you can do some stuff with rules. So I think what Jonathan was going for there is you activate this task, certain lights are going to come on, your radio is going to come on to your favorite channel at the right volume level, really kind of just in the thermostats, just setting the right atmosphere for whenever you're activating this task, whether it's when you get home or just when you need to have that right atmosphere.
Now, I don't know if it's like in your household, Amy, but in mine, I know that sometimes the temperature that I want the house to be and the temperature my wife wants the house to be are different temperatures. So since you are going to be setting off the automation task, we're setting it up for you.
All right.
Okay, so now I've actually defined what the automation task is. But now I need different things to activate it. Just like I said, otherwise I'd have to keep rewriting this over and over again, which is just...
But you've already got the F key activating it from, having assigned that to the F key. You've already got the key fob activating it, having assigned that to the key fob. So those things are already going to be in place without the need for additional rules. But let's just say, when you disarm the system, you wanted this same thing to happen, then you could write a rule for that. So you can see how, a task can be activated numerous ways, but the rule is required to define it.
Oh, I'm trying to get last user, and I'm wondering, like, what in the world? There. To be sure, any way you disarm the system, it's automatically going to work for you. Ta-da!
Okay, let's see if we can squeeze in one more example. And then I've got just a couple questions here.
Which example do you want?
I'll let you pick since I was so pushy before.
Since I now have a teenage daughter, I like the teenage daughter rule for me, which is whenever a zone is going to change, let's pick her bedroom window, for example, whenever it becomes not secure. But I only want this to work during certain times. So let's say whenever it is going to be later than 10 p.m. I don't want anybody sneaking in or out of the house. For example, if someone is trying to sneak in or out, first of all, I like to get their attention, so I'm going to chirp the siren twice. I also would like to turn on the sprinkler system because, in case it is a boy trying to sneak in, I'm going to go ahead and cool his jets right off the bat. I'll turn that on for, I don't know, like 2 minutes will probably be long enough. We can also go ahead and turn on lighting. So we can turn on the front porch light, and you can see you can turn on like a bunch of different things. And that's just kind of an example of that particular rule.
You could add to that, beeping the keypad, sending a message to the keypad, making a voice announcement. I mean, there's just any number of things that you could add to that. And, really.
I'm trying to save some time.
Yeah. So a couple of questions here. We've really running out of time, but I just want to squeak in just a few more here. We've talked a lot about the sunrise, sunset, and that does allow the system to know when those things are going to occur so that you can trigger rules off of them. But we did have a question about, what if it's a cloudy day and you need the lights to come on even though it's, the sun's still up. I'm not familiar with a particular product I would recommend there, but if there is a like a photo type light sensor that produces a dry contact or just a simple contact closure output, you could use that into a zone and factor that into your rules. Again, I'm not familiar with a specific product there, but that was the question, is could you use a light sensor? And again, going back to the example we were talking about, the log and sending the log to a printer, the information is pushed out of the serial port, but it's raw data, so that's why it can't go straight to a printer, because you wouldn't be able to interpret it very easily. So that covers those couple of questions that we had there. If you have any other questions, feel free to let us know. You can reach me directly at training@elkproducts.com, and I'll be happy to answer your questions for you. We will provide a follow-up email. You'll get that sometime Monday, and it'll have this presentation. We did record this session, so you'll get a copy of that recording and some other stuff. So be looking for that. We appreciate you spending the time with with us today. Hopefully you got a lot out of this and are a lot more comfortable and familiar with our M1 control panel. If you need anything, just reach out to tech support or to me, and we'll be happy to help you out. And want to thank Jonathan for being with us today and doing such a great job as usual, and wish everyone a happy weekend.